The 4 steps of emotional embodiment strategy. Embodying an emotion involves expanding the emotion in the body as much as possible so that the emotion becomes more available, more regulated, and more tolerable. That is the consequence of expanding the emotion to more parts of the body. When emotion is confined to one part of the body or a few parts of the body, because an emotion can be potentially experienced in as much of the body as possible, the limited parts of the body that the emotion is confined to make it more stressful, more dysregulating to the body in those parts, those limited parts, making the emotion less available, less regulated, and more intolerable. So that is the basic logic. The logic is simply as follows. With a simple analogy, it's easier to lift a 20-kilo bag with 2 arms than with 1 arm. And that is something that the client has to understand by your education, so that the client is motivated to engage in expanding an emotion that they don't want to experience in the first place. Now, the strategy of emotional embodiment is executed or implemented in 4 steps. Let us look at what the steps are. Step 1 is working with the problem situation. What does that mean? Emotions are always products of a situation. Even when a client comes in with just a physical symptom, you can ask them to generate emotional responses to a difficult physical symptom and enter the process there. Now, the emergence of an emotion in a client depends very much on one thing. The most important thing is whether the client feels supported to have an emotional response by you, and whether the client has enough support on the inside that they've introjected from past social interactions to support the emotion. So that is something that the therapist provides by empathic enough of an inquiry. There are so many ways of doing it, but it has to be done, not only in the second step, but also throughout the process, so that this emotion does not disappear on you and the client. So support is one step of working with the emotion, but then very often therapists just give up looking for emotions because they work with a very limited notion of what emotions are. As I said earlier, primary emotions and the combinations, what are called secondary emotions, are not adequate to explain the entire spectrum of emotional experiences people have. For example, people just feel good or bad in a situation, and that is there in every aspect of their lives, in every moment. So if a client tells us that they're feeling bad about a particular situation, you already have an emotion, and that we call a sensory motor emotion. And there are any number of such emotions, like feeling empty, feeling full, feeling pleasured, feeling painful, feeling awful, feeling wonderful. They're all sensory motor emotions. There are meaningful reactions to situations. So by expanding the range of emotional experiences, it is always possible to arrive at an emotional experience in every situation or in relation to any symptom. And then there are innate and psychological defenses people have against emotions. Innate defenses are based on the pleasure principle of Dr. Freud. Essentially, people do not want to have pain. They just want more pleasure. And so the brain is geared toward pushing away states in the body that are unpleasant. The physiology of emotion is the physiology of regulation. The brain does not want the unpleasant emotion to dysregulate the body too much. And therefore, there is a very low threshold for tolerating pain in all of us, in some of us more than in others, given our conditioning, given our background, given the support we've had for emotions. So people have to understand that we all have the innate resistance to unpleasant emotions, unpleasant experiences. They're like the shadow that we have that follows throughout our lives. But at the same time, we have to understand that we have to face certain events of suffering in our lives to actually work through them so that we're not held back by them. And we understand that there is a resistance to unpleasant experience in all of us. And at the same time, we have to reach beyond that to embrace our suffering and expand it so that it becomes not, it doesn't involve as much suffering as we might imagine when it's confined to few parts of the body. Then there are psychological defenses. Men don't cry, we show sadness, women don't show anger, etc. Any number of such differences can be there in an individual that they've gotten from family systems, cultural systems, religion, or for the immediate peer group, etc. So we have to look for and work with these psychological differences as well. But once we have the emotion, we have to continue to support them. And as we support them, then we also have to work with differences that are there in the body, brain, and energy systems of people. And that's the next step, expanding the body, the brain, and energy by working with defenses in them against emotions to expand and regulate and make the emotion more tolerable in the immediate physical body of the client. Now, to do that, we can use a number of tools: awareness, movement, breath, body work, self-touch of the client, energy work, etc. And there are any number of possibilities. However, we need to find a tool that is most comfortable for the therapists who use them and the clients who actually end up being using it themselves. So in ISP, we use a lot of self-touch that we can teach clients to do themselves in the sessions so that they can also use them outside. But whatever clients, therapists feel comfortable using, they can use. So self-touch is an unobtrusive way of asking the clients to work with their own energy defenses or brain and body defenses. And then when we expand the body or expand the energy by working with body defenses, brain defenses, or energy defenses, what can happen is that we can expand the body or energy in such a way that the emotional experience is more dysregulated, more painful, etc. Or we can do it in such a way by using model of physical body regulation or using the model of energy body regulation, that the experience of the emotion as we work with brain, body, or energy defenses to make the emotion more available. There are ways of expanding based on these models of regulation of energy and body that are easier for the client, more tolerable for the client than not. So in ISP, we use a model of physical body regulation based on blood flow and nervous system flow, and a model of energy body regulation based on the flow of different energy patterns. These are the details of the method of ISP that's taught in the ISP training. Now, when we expand the emotional experience, we expand the body or energy or the brain to expand emotional experience, care should be taken that we shouldn't let go of the situation and the support for the emotion so that the emotion disappears. This is often what happens in systems that focus a lot on regulation. And so there's always a balance between how to expand the emotion, regulate the emotion, make it more tolerable, and expand the body, expand energy, and so on. It's a balance between the two. And that's something that's an art that one learns as one practices the method of emotional embodiment. And finally, the fourth step, which is an optional step, is the one of integration. What that means is that the body or the energy expands and becomes more regulated when we work with the underlying emotion that led to the shutdown. And whenever body energy is shut down, it becomes more dysregulated and more stressed. But we can capture the underlying emotion that leads to the shutdown and create a capacity for it by expanding the body and energy. Then the body and energy of the person is free to expand and to be regulated. And noticing it from time to time can be help in making it more bearable for the client to go through the experience of being with an emotion for as long a period of time as possible to create a greater capacity for it. It's an optional step. It doesn't have to be tended to, but it's also a way of bringing the client out if the therapist senses there isn't time or the client has done enough, lets the problem situation go, the emotion go, and then one starts to notice the integration or the benefit that has taken place in the body and the energy of the individual from the hard work of emotional embodiment that the client has been engaged in. And it's always good a good thing to do toward the end of the session before the client goes out, whether or not they're still experiencing an emotion. So these are the 4 steps of emotional embodiment.